We're going to talk about non-lethal weapons today. All the rioting and all the fun that the world is having right now with the peaceful protests. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about non-lethal today. Show notes are going out in YouTube land. If you're not in YouTube land, good for you. You can go to PATRIOT'Ssoapbox.com, look for the shows tab. When you go to the shows tab, you will find a banner that looks kind of like this. It's big tech, biologic, internet gateway technology. And this show discusses the fusion of the digital with the biological, or the biologic. That is the underpinning essence of this program, no pun intended. So we're going to read some documents from the Bradford Institute, and then we're going to look at some patents because I like reading patents. So let's see what's on the agenda. Bradford Non-Lethal Weapons Research Project. A couple of those. I didn't post all of them on this on the archives. You can search Bradford Non-Lethal and report number, and you will find all of them online. There were a few that I found and a few more that I found last minute. And they tie in very nicely with our world today and how we sort of see and understand the ways in which the population is controlled with physical force. And we have to define what physical force is, because when we think of physical force, we think of it as, you know, batons or tear gas or tasers, right? The physical force can also be sound and light and electromagnetics. So we're going to start with December 2003, Bradford Non-Lethal Weapons Research Project. And this is from the University of Bradford. They consult and do research and pull analysis from a variety of different international bodies to provide assessments. So we're going to skim through these. I've highlighted some areas of interest, but we'll go slow so we kind of get a feel for what it is we're looking at here. Non-Lethal Weapons Research Project. Technologies: electrical, directed energy, acoustic, chemicals and materials, kinetic energy, barriers and entanglements, biological non-lethal weapons. Wonder what those are. Combined technologies and delivery systems. So they get into human effects, or at least organizations that study the human effects, and international law, and then they've got their references, etc. And here's acronyms for all the different terms that they use. It's a very, very good report. So non-lethal weapons are explicitly designed and primarily employed to incapacitate personnel and material, while it's minimizing collateral damage to property and the environment. Existing non-lethal weapons include rubber and plastic bullets, entangling nets, chemical sprays such as OC and CS gas, and electrical stunning devices such as a taser gun. New non-lethal weapons are on the way. This is back in 2003. Which will include acoustic and microwave weapons, non-lethal landmines, malodorants, which are like stink bombs, and sophisticated weapons developed through rapid advances in neuroscience and the genomics revolution. Non-lethal weapons that are being developed through rapid advances in neuroscience and genomics. Interesting. In particular, emerging non-lethal technologies offer an increasing opportunity for the suppression of civil dissent and the control of populations. These are sometimes referred to as the technologies of political control. There is a continuing need for sustained and informed commentary to such developments, which highlights the impact and threats that these technologies pose to civil liberties and to human rights. Technologies. The areas covered are necessarily focused on the United States, partly due to the greater availability of information compared to other countries such as the UK, but also because the United States is leading much of the research into non-lethal weapons. The desire for more accurate and discriminate weapon systems that combine the ability to apply force from increased standoff distances, that means applying force at distance, far away, are important drivers for non-lethal weapons development. As a result, there is a great interest in delivery systems that may help achieve these goals. In the military, at least, technologies such as directed energy that could potentially offer tunable capabilities from non-lethal to lethal are proving attractive. Non-lethal to lethal, tunable. Interesting. And so I'm biased. I'm going to say that right now. I'm interested when I look at these documents for sound, light, and electromagnetics. The electrical stuff we can browse through briefly, but we're all most of us are kind of familiar with tasers and things like that, right? We're seeing those used quite a bit. If you frequent any social media, you'll see that kind of stuff being used. Pepper spray, tasers, batons. And so a lot of this document talks about the commercial viability of existing systems and what's upcoming. And they've got some interesting technologies here. Directed energy, active denial technology. And some of us have heard of this before. These are the vehicle mounted systems that basically shoot directed energy at you and make you feel like your skin's on fire. Vehicle-mounted active denial system was first unveiled by the U.S. military in March 2001. It employs a beam of millimeter wave electromagnetic energy to heat the skin of individuals in its path for use in area denial or crowd control. The range of VMADs is not in the public domain, but the aim is to produce a system that can be effective beyond small arms range, which is around 750 meters. Although it has been tested on animals and human volunteers, the full range of health effects from exposure to this weapon remain unclear. As a report published by the National Academy of Sciences in early 2003 stated, the VMADs affect near instantaneous heating of an individual by radio frequency energy. It is well understood empirically, but much remains to be learned about the biological implications of such heating. So they turn this on and your skin instantly heats up. It feels like fire. So they're just resonating the water molecules and actually creating a temperature change. And what they're doing is they're exciting the receptors in your skin, the pain receptors in your skin. They'll talk about that in one of these documents further down. The report also pointed out one area of concern with millimeter wave devices designed to induce biological effects is the potential for ocular damage to your eye, such as corneal lesions, as well as the inadvertent exposure of targets at close range, which could lead to severe burns or other injuries. The U.S. Air Force Research Laboratory reviewed the bioeffects research that has been conducted so far in relation to the VMADs. The safety of this system is therefore dependent upon the ability of a subject to move away from the beam before it causes damage to the skin or the eyes. Although, as the developers envisaged, the target will have sufficient time to react to the painful response and withdraw from the situation. The question arises as to what happens if an individual is unable to move away from the beam for whatever reason. Despite the uncertainty concerning the health effects of this technology, the U.S. Marines plans to field this system as early as 2005. And I want to pause here for a moment of reflection. What if you cannot get away from millimeter waves? And we all collectively at this point understand millimeter waves, associate millimeter waves, rather stated, with 5G, even though 5G is beyond millimeter waves. There's low band, mid band, and high band 5G. And you can also quantify 5G as an architectural design, utilizing and folding in older generations, forwards and backwards compatibility, and integrating the frequency spectrum, which includes radio waves as well as millimeter waves. Those are different parts of the electromagnetic scale. Now, one could argue that this system that we're talking about, the active denial system, this VMAD system, has to do with focused, concentrated millimeter waves, right? So the focused, concentrated millimeter waves are likely coherent waves, and they're designed exclusively or explicitly to excite tissue and excite the receptors in the skin and whatnot. But nonetheless, the platforms are being assembled that theoretically, in my opinion, can basically do the same thing to you, just in different frequencies. And it's this idea of concentrating electromagnetic energy, coherent waves, whether they are transmitted that way or they're transmitted in a way so that when they hit the target, they are received that way as coherent reinforcing waves to increase the energy applied to a subject or to a target. So we'll look at some of those patents as it relates to organizations like Boeing being able to concentrate and direct electromagnetic energy. And we'll also look at some non-lethal applications of electromagnetic energy for disorientation and temporarily disabling things like your ability to have an awareness of your environment. Basically, it's a disorienting type technology where they interact with the vestibular system, which has to do with your ears. And they use the same frequencies that 4G and 3G mobile communications utilize for communication. So we'll look at that in a little while, but we need to get through some more of this stuff. Active denial systems, millimeter waves, focused, coherent electromagnetic energy used as a weapons platform to deter and or disperse crowds, utilized for crowd control and or perimeter security. That's what active denial systems are. High-powered microwaves. The U.S. military is reportedly to be considering the use of high-powered microwave weapons during the recent conflict in Iraq. Such weapons deliver a burst of electromagnetic radiation designed to degrade or destroy the circuits of electronic equipment. There are two main types of high-powered microwave weapons: wideband weapons, which release a burst of radiation over a broad frequency range generated by high explosive or an electromagnetic generator. Wideband, wait a minute, we've covered that on this show. And now they couldn't cross-apply that technology to the wideband antennas that they're rolling out in cell phones now, could they? Could they? I don't know. Just a thought. And narrowband weapons, which are electrically driven and are directed at specific targets. Electromagnetic pulse weapons. Air Force Research Laboratory based at Kirtland Air Force Base, New Mexico, where research into these weapons is conducted by the U.S. Department of Defense. A short burst of high-power microwave energy can be lethal to electronics while having no effect on humans operating the equipment. Do you remember the document we read the other day? This was a few days ago. The Mind Has No Firewall, discussing the human organism actually as a computer system likened to circuitry, etc. So it's a little contradictory in my view, and I think a lot of it has to do with the choice in the frequency range used and the power levels and the way it's modulated. But that's for you to decide as we learn more and more about the ways in which they can manipulate electromagnetic energy. And we will get into medical applications as time goes on. Concern has been expressed over their potential secondary effects on civilian electronics, such as hospital equipment and heart pacemakers. So we're talking about high energy microwaves, right? High powered microwaves. What else is in this one? High energy lasers. Now, this is an interesting one, and we might digress briefly after reading this because I want to show you a patent from Facebook. It's a very, very interesting patent, and I saw it, and I wondered, now, why would Facebook have a patent like that? I'll show you in a moment. High-energy lasers are being investigated for non-lethal applications. The Advanced Tactical Laser is a chemical laser system being developed by Boeing for the U.S. military, which would be lethal if used against humans. Planned non-lethal uses include bursting automobile tires, rupturing fuel tanks, selectively cutting through electrical or communications lines, or setting fires. Or setting fires. Or setting fires. However, the NAS report noted that chemical laser systems are very bulky, and that complex logistics and handling, high costs, and unconvincing demonstrations to date further contribute to the unattractiveness of chemical laser systems for non-lethal weapons applications. But are they advantageous for lethal applications or for anti-vehicle, anti-aircraft, anti-forest, anti-California? I'm just playing. That's just speculation on that last little piece there. High-energy lasers are also being considered by the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate for anti-personnel purposes. One such weapon being developed by the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate in collaboration with Mission Research Corporation is the pulsed energy projectile, the effects of which were described in the NAS report. Pulsed energy projectile would utilize a pulsed deuterium fluoride laser. Listen to this. This is one of my favorites. Pulsed deuterium fluoride laser designed to produce an ionized plasma at the target surface. In turn, the plasma would produce an ultrasonic pressure wave that would pass into the body, stimulating the cutaneous nerves in the skin, so the nerves that are on the few outside layers, to produce pain and induce temporary paralysis. Pulsed energy projectile using deuterium fluoride, right? A laser, they pulse it, and it produced ionized plasma at the target surface. So let's say a sphere around you would be the target area. So you would have to range how far away you are, and then configure the system, so to speak, send the pulse, and when it gets to that particular range, it would create this plasma that would generate an ultrasonic pressure wave that would then pass through your body and immobilize you, disable you, or cause an insane amount of pain. Now, that is some complex stuff, and it sounds very, very cool. And ideally, what we're looking at here are just variations of directed energy weapon systems. So when you think about future troop carryable, right, that size, that form factor, something that would be like a lightweight backpack with an aiming device, or something that's completely encased in an 8 or a 10-pound rifle or a sidearm. Being able to do something like this, we're dancing on the realm of kind of like Star Trek-y kind of stuff. Set your phases to stun, that kind of a thing. This is back in 2003. They're looking at this kind of stuff. So anyway, described by the former director of the JNLWD, Joint Non-Lethal Weapons, something or other, here it is, being akin to a Star Trek phaser. The PEP will have a rheostatic capability. So rheostat is something like a knob you turn up the temperature, turn down the temperature, turn up the volume, turn down the volume, old school radio style, right? That enables variable effects from non-lethal to lethal. This promise of adjustable or tunable power levels is seen as a major advantage of directed energy non-lethal weapons. As a non-lethal weapon, it has been developed for use in crowd control by the military and law enforcement agencies. The system, which has a range of 2 kilometers, is not person portable, but could be mounted on a vehicle or an aircraft. The PEP's development has been very secretive, and there is little information available in the public domain. Experiments have shown that the pressure wave caused by the PEP penetrated further than expected into test materials, and that the energy it produced at the surface of the target person could burn away clothing. Doesn't sound very non-lethal to me. Maybe they have some more work to do. Acoustics, non-lethal weapons 2003. National Academy of Sciences reported. The concept of an acoustic non-lethal weapon is focused on acoustic generators for projecting sound downrange to affect crowds, to provide area denial, or to clear facilities. Generators that have been explored for producing these high intensity include sirens, whistles, pulse jets, vortex generators, explosives, and fuel air devices. So audible sound at high levels that cause pain in the ear can be effective in incapacitating someone, but it is also likely to cause permanent damage to hearing. Another concern is the effects beyond those on the ear caused by infrasound or ultrasound have not been demonstrated effectively. Despite the apparent limitations of acoustic non-lethal weapons in causing incapacitation without irreversible adverse effects, some systems appear to be in the late stages of development. Some of these devices have arisen as secondary uses of a technology for directing sound. Two companies have concurrently developed technologies that use ultrasonic frequencies to project sound in a narrow beam so that only those individuals within the beam will be able to hear the audible sound created. Interesting, huh? Ultrasound, focus ultrasound, two different beams intersect. If you're in the intersection of those beams, then you hear something and everyone else around you does not. This technology is used in museums. So you can stand in front of an exhibit in front of like a placard or something, and you will hear audio about the exhibit that you're looking at, yet you step outside that invisible bubble and the rest of the museum is quiet. These are viable, usable, commercialized technologies. ATC's Military Operations Division has refined its directed sound technology to produce high-intensity directed acoustic devices. Interesting. So they can weaponize this technology too. Long-range acoustic devices, LRADs, some of you have probably heard of that term, has almost reached the marketplace. This is back in 2003. The LRAD is designed to deliver audible warning messages over long distances, 500 meters to 1 kilometer, to individuals, vessels straying too close to security zones. However, at closer distances, it is considerably more incapacitating, and according to the General Dynamics fact sheet, LRAD can produce 120 decibels of audio at 60 meters, and peak levels of 130 decibels at 4 meters. Hearing damage can occur at levels as low as 80 decibels if exposure is over a long period. However, at levels of 120 decibels and over, there is a potential for hearing loss even after very short exposures. In addition to ear pain, reportedly, some HIDA devices can cause such side effects as loss of equilibrium, vomiting, and migraines. Vortex generators is the next acoustic technology, a vortex generator. Very interesting. An acoustic technology receiving considerable R&D attention is the vortex generator. These generators can be used for the propagation of vortex rings, which are being investigated for their potential applications as non-lethal acoustic projectiles for crowd control. The principal idea behind this technology is to project a vortex of air at high speed towards a target to create an impact. They're doing this with acoustic waves, folks, to generate air, a push of air, vortex of air at high speeds towards a target to create an impact. Scientific Applications and Research Associates have been developing a non-lethal weapons based on this technology for law enforcement purposes called a vortex launcher. According to their website, the vortex feels like having a bucket of ice water thrown into your chest. It's very, very interesting. Okay, so before we get into chemicals and materials, I did say that I wanted to show you this Facebook patent, and it had to do with the lasers, right? Talking about lasers. And so I want to show you this. Remotely supplied power for unmanned aerial vehicle, Facebook, 2015. Patented by Facebook. System includes a laser configured to generate a laser beam and a laser aiming module configured to aim the laser beam, at least in part, incident on a remotely located continuously moving solar cell. So what this is a remotely powering device. I'll show you some pictures here. So you have a drone. You have a laser-based system that is then drawing energy from a grid, converting that energy into light or something that a solar cell or similar like energy absorber can collect on the underbody of a drone. And it looks like it is then providing communication services to somebody. Very, very cool stuff. Boeing has these technologies too, where they can focus directed energy. They don't even have to use lasers. They can use other waveforms. And they can remotely power airplanes as well. This is where this patent came from, was looking at a Boeing patent for directed energy, multiple energy beams. Look, communications, solar cells, laser beams coming up, hitting the solar cells. You have upper solar cells to power it from the top. So these things theoretically would be launched and never come down. They would never come down and be able to provide a mobile communications platform. So when we look at 5G and we look at the ways in which 5G can be implemented by big tech, because this is not the only company that has these kinds of technologies. Amazon's looking at giant flotillas that have drones that come out of them. They're floating warehouses. You better believe they're going to be delivering comms this way as well. But you've got satellites that would be able to beam down and connect and communicate with this kind of a apparatus, which would then be able to beam communications down. So what we're looking at are private networks that have the ability to intercept communications from space or intercept communications from the land and redirect those communications. And if these are private companies operating within a sovereign nation, what is it that the government needs to do? What does the government need to do to ensure that these types of ad hoc networks, dedicated private networks, are in compliance with things like national security? So I do remember something happening to a satellite that Facebook was trying to launch once upon a time. I think it blew up. There was some kind of catastrophic failure or something like that. This was 2 years ago? So anyway, I bring this up because it's directed energy, number one. Two, it's not necessarily non-lethal, although it could be. If you want to go down the rabbit trail of what this communication link, so to speak, could potentially do, considering it's a wireless communication link that's powered by a laser system. This laser system would be able to power the flight and power the transmission of any antennas used by this drone for communication. So Anyway, you can read about this if you like. It's in the show notes. And basically, it's directed energy to provide artificial power to this thing. So it doesn't need fuel. It has a battery bank and solar cells and can stay in the air forever and ever and ever. Let's get back to chemicals and materials. And we'll go back to directed energy in a little while. And I'll show you some patents where it can manipulate people. Malodorants, stink bombs. The U.S. military has shown interest in malodorant compounds, often termed as stink bombs or skunk shots, for use as non-lethal weapons. The NAS assessment of non-lethal weapon technology stated that malodorants have a strong potential for controlling crowds and clearing facilities and area denial. Recent work on characterizing the effectiveness of these compounds, which could be used in combination to address cross-cultural differences in effectiveness. Now, what does that mean to you? You're going to use a stink bomb to address cross-cultural differences? I'd like to talk to a sociologist and have them give me or provide some examples of what cross-cultural differences convert to a smell, and then having an occupying country use an unfavorable smell that has to do with a culturally specific type of a characterization on the population that's being controlled. It's just, anyway, when I read that, it was very, very interesting to think that those concepts are being fused together. We're going to use a stink bomb, and we are going to pick the right stink bomb based on cultural specificity. Just, anyway, I found that amusing. The Non-Lethal Environment Evaluation Remediation Center at Kansas State University is currently studying the potential environmental issues associated with two malodorant compounds developed by the U.S. military called bathroom malodor and humi. Their naming conventions are comical. The center is also conducting a toxicological assessment of malodorants. A presentation by NEAR at Non-Lethal Technology and Academic Research Symposium in late 2001 outlined some of the acute health effects that can be caused by odorous chemicals, substances under consideration for use as components of malodorant mixtures. So you've got all of these chemicals. I'm not going to try to pronounce these things. I would mispronounce them and it just, an exercise in futility. The acute health effects of some of the cool chemicals that apparently don't smell very good irritates the eyes, skin, and the respiratory tract. They can cause, this one here causes abdominal cramps, tissue damage, and irritation, coughing, choking, headache, dizziness, weakness, pulmonary edema, tightness in the chest, air hunger, or cyanosis. Close relative to sayonara, but not quite because it's non-lethal. Then you have eye and skin irritation, cough, headache, nausea, vomiting, and dizziness, and corrosiveness, causing burns, irritation of the eyes, skin, and respiratory tract. This is for stink bombs, malodorants. A study carried out by the Monell Chemical Senses Center for the JNLWD, Joint Non-Lethal Weapons something or other, found that the medium and high malodor concentrations elicit the following symptoms: reduction in respiratory volume, meaning you don't breathe in as much air, right? Increase in respiratory rate, because you're not breathing enough air, your respiration rate increases because you need more air. Heightened electrodermal response, interesting, heightened electrodermal response, the electrical conductivity in your skin. Suppression of gastric signal amplitude and increase in frequency consistent with tachygastria. For you nurses and doctors out there, that might make more sense to you than it does to me. It just probably upsets your tummy. Probably a simple way to say that. According to the NAS report, the U.S. military does not consider the development of malodorants to be restricted by the Chemical Weapons Convention. the development of malodorants is not considered to be restricted by the Chemical Weapons Convention. Malodorants are not considered toxic chemicals since they do not cause or are not specifically designed to cause death, temporary incapacitation, or permanent harm to humans or animals. Thus, the U.S. classifies them as riot control agents. It is perhaps premature to make this classification since the near presentation in 2001 pointed out there is very little information available on the toxicity of the chemical components of malodorants. Anti-material chemicals. Now, these are really interesting. And DARPA's been looking at this stuff over the last 20 or 30 years in their synthetic biology, biotechnology department. Check this stuff out. Anti-material chemicals. There are a number of chemical compounds that are being considered for anti-material use by the U.S. Department of Defense, as outlined in the NAS report on non-lethal weapons. Classes of compounds having the potential as anti-material non-lethal weapons have been examined. They include combustion modifiers, anti-additives, fuel contaminants, lubricant contaminants, viscosity enhancing agents, depolymerization agents, and abrasives that might be used against engines and vehicles, corrosive agents, depolymerization agents, and embrittlement agents, making things brittle, could be used against a wider range of infrastructure. Some very cool stuff, because you just kind of like set it and forget it kind of stuff. And then when the infrastructure or the vehicle or whatever, the asset is used, it basically just breaks. One of the main limiting factors with the development of these types of non-lethal weapons is the difficulty in delivering the agent to the target. Well, that's why you have really smart, well-trained people now, huh? What else is in here? Riot control agents. Here we go with some of the commonly understood and fun stuff. There have been many significant developments as regards to riot control agents in the recent years. Remember, this is a 2003 document. PAVA, a synthetic version of the oleoresin capsaicin, OC spray or pepper spray, has become more popular for use in law enforcement since it is more potent than the natural product. It is used widely by law enforcement organizations in North America and some European countries, including police forces in the UK, who now use the PAVA sprays instead of CS. Most attention in the non-lethal weapon development in the area of RCAs is focused on methods of delivery. For example, Pepper Ball Technologies, formerly J-Core Tactical Systems, produces PAVA-filled projectiles for use with its pepper ball system. These are paintballs with pepper spray in them, basically. According to the company, the system, which made its first public appearance when deployed by police against demonstrators in Seattle in 1999, is currently used by more than 1,300 law enforcement, corrections, security, and government agencies throughout the world. The projectiles are fired at 300 to 380 feet per second using compressed air launchers with a range of 30 feet. The pistol-sized launchers, the SA-10, has a capacity of 10 rounds. But a larger version of the launcher, the SA-200, can hold up to 180 rounds. And this can be further expanded to hold 450 or 850 rounds. When the plastic projectile hits a person or a hard surface, it breaks and releases a small cloud of powdered PAVA. Recently, Pepper Ball Technologies have made the technology available to the commercial market and to consumers in the US. It can now be a pistol-sized version of the system with the PAVA projectiles rebranded as the neutralizer for personal use. Although Pepper Ball systems fire PAVA projectiles, they are not just characterized as chemical non-lethal weapons, since there is considerable kinetic impact when the round hits a person's body. The company called this combination of chemical and kinetic effects cheminetics. there is a general trend in the non-lethal weapons field to develop systems that combine different technologies for added effects. This is a key thing to remember when we start looking at directed energy systems, whether they be electromagnetic, sound, or light. It is this idea of combining different technologies for an added or an improved effect. So just remember that that's possible. And this is something that is a topic or a category that's studied when looking at non-lethal weapon systems or non-lethal weapon platforms. According to the company, the kinetic impact of their projectile is less than or equal to standard paintballs. John Alexander, a retired colonel in the U.S. Army who formerly worked on non-lethal weapons at Los Alamos National Laboratory, reported his experiences testing the pepperball system to a recent conference. The combined effects had me on my knees, holding my chest and coughing in less than 2 seconds. Though asked questions about how I felt, there was great difficulty in speaking for the next couple of minutes. However, within 5 minutes, most of the effects had dissipated. Vassal, vice president of Pepperball Tactical Systems, had warned me that most people typically only welt or bruise. Depending upon body fat content, some people may leak a little. I was a leaker, so he must have been a chubby buddy. Leaking means that it actually breaks the skin, folks, and you bleed. That's what leaking means. A similar compressed air launcher system firing plastic rounds that break on impact is the FN-303, manufactured by FN Herstal. The launcher comes in 2 forms. One clips to the underside of an M16 machine gun. The other is a standalone launcher for use in law enforcement. Amongst the projectiles available are those filled with oleoresin capsaicin and OCCS mixture. The Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, DSTL, are developing a similar chemical delivery system for riot control agents called discriminating irritant projectiles. The research so far indicates a preference for frangible projectiles containing powdered CS mixed with silica powder, as well as these recently developed breakable projectiles for delivering riot control agents. There are a large variety of shells, grenades, and sprays for delivering these agents. And I'll show you real quickly some cool pictures. I found this document right before the show, and this has to do with riot control. And this is a company or an organization that paired up with the Bradford Institute. And they talk about what they've learned over the last couple decades and what they can do, right? So here's basically a smoke grenade that's got riot control CS gas in it. And some of these things are dated. Squad riot control dispenser. So something on a backpack looks similar to like what a flamethrower thing would look like, but it's just shooting out this kind of gas stuff. So you guys remember the videos coming out of China where they were disinfecting the roads and the streets with foggers? It's a similar type of idea or concept, only instead of it being a fogger with chemicals of God knows what was in it, this is going to be, OC gas, CS gas. In this case, it says employment of dispersing dry CS spray. Here's a gun-mounted version with a canister, it looks like, on the front. And this is it's just a giant fogger. And you've got a backpack-based system here. And then you've got looks like it attaches here. Here's the little adapters to attach in. And again, these things look old, they're dated. Just to give you an idea of what this stuff looks like. And here's basically it's an M203 launcher, 40 millimeter grenade launcher mounted on the bottom of a rifle, and the different canisters that are associated, smoke and CS gas. So those in the military who carry these things likely are very familiar with the form factor and the profile and what the different armaments are from HE to non-lethal. And smoke cartridge, it's giving you a basic breakdown, and they label them. You can tell just by what band color they are or what the tip color is, what it is you're dealing with. And they do that so it's very easy to identify, so you don't load the wrong thing and hurt people or not hurt people when you want to hurt people. 40 millimeter, 60 millimeter CS rifle grenades. A rifle grenade out of an AK, folks. Interesting, huh? Something that goes in on the front of a assault rifle and is fired. 2009, Thailand. This looks like a type of a mortar, small range mortar type system. This looks like it's something that goes on the ground and put the shells in, and it looks like it's a multiple firing mechanism, and you can range it, and it says here 16 shells. So that wow. Another mortar-based system and/or vehicle-based system for smoke or tear gas. Different armaments that it can use. We're talking about chemical weapons here, folks. But they're riot control agents, so they make a distinguishing, there's a difference legally, international treaties, international conventions, whatever. There's a difference between chemical weapons and riot control agents. And there's stipulations that talk about domestic riot control versus occupation and handling riot control. If you're an occupying country, you actually have less resources, less options. You can do more, you have more options available to you if you're suppressing your own population versus suppressing a population while you are an occupying force. And these documents, the Bradford documents, actually talk about that a little bit, where they start making the distinctions. Here's more advanced systems, right? Giant, this is called a Venom. The Marine Corps uses this stuff. And Israel uses this stuff. And this one is a system that's mounted on a robot with a lethal weapon system and a non-lethal weapon system on a robot. And as we move forward in time, when we look at these documents, they actually talk about using robots for riot control, and there's some pictures of that. Non-lethal weapon, Iron Fist, just a ridiculous amount of tubes to be firing projectiles out. So here's a cool picture. This is a completely automated system, right? Where it's controlled from inside the vehicle, it looks like. And you can see over here, they're dispersing chemicals to these people through this system. This is the kind of stuff your tax dollars fund. China's got their own. Drum fed. Looks like 40 millimeter. It's a 30 millimeter drum fed system. This looks like a Mark 19, but this is the Chinese knockoff version. This looks just like a Mark 19 with some subtle cosmetic variations. It's a 35 millimeter system. Rocket propelled grenades for non-lethal. Mortar tubes, some of the standard kind of mortar tubes. Tear gas. Mortar projectiles. Artillery projectiles for non-lethal. Crazy. Oh. Yeah. Stuff off a tank. And different munitions. They range from small arms up to and including being fired out of the main gun of a tank. Oh. A helicopter equipped with riot control agents. Here is a helicopter equipped with riot control agents. Here is an airplane equipped. This is an airplane equipped with riot control agents so they can bomb. They will drop riot control bombs. Unbelievable. And you have unmanned aerial vehicles that are able to deliver these payloads as well. Paintball guns, and here's a more modernized robot, so to speak, that has got a weapon system on it, non-lethal weapon system. But these are paintball guns that are much better designed, in my view. Yeah, these are much better designed. CO2 canister, there's your reservoir, your tank, so to speak, and off you go. And you've got advanced robotic systems, modular advanced robotic systems, the Mars system. Look at this thing. This thing can be outfitted for whatever. It's got eyes and ears and weapons galore. Tank track-based system. And it's just, this is the future right here. When you think about having networks set up where you can automate and remotely control this stuff from a distance, like you won't even need to be in the same country, and you can control these things. That's what's going to be available. And when you start looking at DARPA's Spectrum program, where they're looking at fusing the military and the civilian networks together, all with this rollout of 5G to be able to run military operations over civilian-based networks and not disrupt civilian-based networks and not have traffic over the civilian-based networks or the usage of the civilian-based networks to disrupt or impede military communications. We are literally constructing wireless networks that are going to be used by the military and the civilian markets simultaneously at the same time. And these robots are going to be bought by law enforcement, homeland security, and on and on and on and on. And they will supplement and augment law enforcement activities. And as we continue to cower in fear at the invisible virus, the invisible enemy, more and more of these will be justifiably purchased in order to protect the public and protect law enforcement from unnecessary risk of infection. And we will thereby be rolling out automation and robotics to replace functions that first responders essentially perform. And we have a first responder network that has been signed into not really law, but they have a 50-state, AT&T has a 50-state contract for a first responder network that runs on low band, mid band, and high band networks, but mostly on low band networks so that they don't have coverage issues. And it is a network that is dedicated exclusively to first responders for disaster response. But what's really going to happen with that is a dedicated band of frequencies that's specifically dedicated for first responders and or first responder type activities that all devices will have the ability to connect with this network. Not just law enforcement, not just fire, not just paramedics. Every consumer device will have the ability to connect to this network. And because those frequencies are dedicated to the first responder network, only the first responder network will have a bidirectional interactivity or interaction with those frequencies. Having said that, that's not to say that those frequencies aren't necessarily being used for other purposes. Other purposes. And those frequencies, by the way, go through walls really, really well. I think they're below gigahertz, below 1 gigahertz. And so all that push, right, when they forced everybody in the United States over to digital high def TV to migrate everybody off of those, I think it was the 700 megahertz band, maybe it was the 800. I'm not sure. I have to look at it. But they migrated everybody off onto HD TV so they could reallocate that bandwidth. And that bandwidth is now used for the first responder network. And these little babies, these little robots right here and other similar type robots, well, they're going to be augmenting the first responders. Anyway, I'm digressing. More munitions, way cool stuff. And we will get back to, ooh, look at this thing. Oh, it's just showing you the field of coverage. Alrighty, well, so this document's in the notes. If you want to look it up, it's statewatch.org. And the title of this document is Drawing the Line, the Regulation of Wide Area Riot Control Agent Delivery Mechanisms under the Chemical Weapons Convention. And it is a partnership of research, if you will, between the Omega Research Foundation and the University of Bradford. This was 2013 when this report was put together. Let's get back to this document here. Incapacitants or disabling chemicals. Now, we are going to spend time on this category as time goes on. We will revisit this on other shows. Do you remember the combinatorial effects where they were talking about using multiple systems to improve the efficacy, to improve the intended effects for non-lethal purposes? Kinetic and pepper spray, right? Electromagnetics and ultrasound, things like that. Chemicals is a huge part of that. And when we look at the amount of medications that are now prescribed, and in particular what they're for, antidepressants, anti-anxieties, antipsychotics, blah, 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 blah. They are designed to interact with the brain and the nervous system for quote unquote mental health. And so incapacitants and disabling chemicals, this was back in 2003. And I really, 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 really want you to pay attention to your families and your neighbors, and just these things are everywhere. And the part that really bothers me is that when people use the restroom, it now goes into the community water systems, and they aren't necessarily filtered out. So when you think about the amount of people taking these types of medications, and we'll get to them in a moment, and that these medications could be, and in some circumstances are, you'd have to look and see if they recycle your wastewater or not, literally put back into the municipal water supply. So, incapacitants, disabling chemicals, one class of non-lethal weapon that was reviewed favorably in the 2003 NAS were incapacitating chemicals or calmatives. The report concluded that calmatives have the potential as non-lethal weapons in many types of missions where the calming of individuals or crowds is needed. The Applied Research Laboratory at Pennsylvania State University, who have worked with the U.S. military and law enforcement agencies on non-lethal weapons since 1997, carried out a study to assess the potential of calmatives based on available literature. Yeah, it's spooky, dude. We're wide open. We are wide open. Clean air and clean water, Mr. President. I heard you say it. You said it over and over and over again. Yeah, our water treatment systems really haven't been upgraded in like 30, 40, 50 years. When we want to talk about infrastructure and the investment in infrastructure, it goes far beyond 5G, which is where the focus for infrastructure investment, broadband to rural communities. Okay. How about all the crap that's leaching into my water from half a century-year-old water pipes? What about the disrepair of the roads? What about that? Just saying. Anyway, the report, the advantages and limitations of calmatives for use as a non-lethal technique, was finished in October of 2000. This was during Bush era, right? Bush, George Bush, end of Clinton, beginning of Bush. Hashtag No Child Left Behind and the introduction of nursing and medical care being publicly funded and subsidized into public schools, and then the medicating of children due to their own, mental health issues and their inability to focus and all the other stuff. With or without parental consent, mind you. Hashtag No Child Left Behind. Again, I'm digressing. So October 2000, Clinton-Bush transition handover. It did not become publicly available until obtained by the Sunshine Project in July 2002 under a Freedom of Information request. The report points out that pharmaceutical agents with the potential as calmatives include compounds known to depress or inhibit the function of the central nervous system, and goes on to say that these include sedative hypnotic agents, anesthetic agents, skeletal muscle relaxants, opioid analgesics, anxiolytics, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and selected drugs of abuse. Specifically, the report identified the following classes of calmative compounds as potential non-lethal chemical agents. Benzodiazepines, used clinically for anti-anxiety, sedation, and general anesthesia, such as diazepam. Now, you go look up your mass shooters. Go look them up. And look at what they were taking. They were taking SSRIs and benzodiazepines and those kinds of things. Just so you know. Combinatorial effects. These interact with the nervous system. They excite or suppress the ability for neurons to fire, action potentials to fire, which in turn sends an electrical signal through the body, through the brain. It either makes it happen or keeps it from happening. So these are combinatorial. If you can disrupt and offset the resting state, the normal state, I think it's negative 70 millivolts is the membrane potential for a neuron. If you take these kinds of medications, it will disrupt or offset or change that resting state, which will make it harder for that neuron to fire or make it easier for that neuron to fire. And we'll cover patents that discuss that in more detail as time goes on. But it's very important to understand that the chemical component, the medication of society, has everything to do with the current mental health state of society under the guise of being helpful. And in some cases it is. Under the guise of being helpful, one needs to ask the question, are these types of medications being overprescribed? What are the side effects? Is it easier for other systems to interact with the nervous system? Things like electromagnetic radiation or magnetic fields or electric fields or the administration of ultrasound or acoustic waves into the body. Because when we start looking at the different receptors in the body, all of those things interact with neurology. You have mechanoreceptors, you have pain receptors, you have voltage gated receptors, and many, many more. And all of those different receptors are responsible for determining whether or not a neuron fires or not. And chemicals, you have chemoreceptors. Chemicals are a part of that equation. And so if you can manipulate neurology with a few different mechanisms, then you don't need as much energy for a single mechanism manipulation. You can use a little bit of energy a lot of different ways and achieve the same result in a much more sophisticated way. And we will discuss that in more detail as time goes on. So, mass shooters, right? Taking mental health, quote unquote, medication for whatever it is they're going to take. And we are talking about non-lethal weapons being discussed as potentially being useful to calm the population and to make the population more compliant. That is what this topic, this section is about. Deborah, I see your comment out there. Can this stuff hurt an unborn baby? Well, an unborn baby has the luxury of having filters, right? Some things pass very cleanly through the placenta and other things do not. I would recommend filtering your water and putting filters on your shower heads and reducing and removing as much of the contaminants as possible out of your water supply. When you shower or bathe, you absorb 7 to 8 cups of water through your skin. The skin is the largest organ on your body. Most people don't drink 7 to 8 cups of water a day. So when you bathe, you absorb a great deal of water through your skin. So filter your water, put shower filters on your showers, or get a nice filter for your whole house, domicile, whatever. Benzodiazepines, known as Valium, anti-anxiety, sedation, general anesthesia, alpha-2 adrenoreceptor agonists, used for sedation, anti-anxiety, to enhance the effects of other anesthetic agents, such as dexmedetomidine, Precedex. One effect of Precedex is to increase the individual's susceptibility to electric shock. Dopamine D3 receptor antagonists. Clinical applications include use as antipsychotic drugs. Serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. Antidepressants, heavily prescribed in America, such as fluoxetine, Prozac, and sertraline Zoloft. Now, this was back in 2003. They have many, many more on the market today. Next is serotonin 5-HT1A receptor agonists, used clinically for the treatment of anxiety, such as Buspar. You can look these medications up, and you will find similar correlating medications that affect the same thing. Should we? Let's do one as an example. Serotonin 5-HT receptors for anxiety. Buspar. Similar medications. Let's see what we have. Busparoine, alternatives compared, drugs.com. Buspar versus Xanax. Buspar oral interactions with other medications. Busparine alternatives. Side effects. So we'll just try one here real quick. It's kind of a fun exercise because you'll learn about What else is out there? Xanax, clonazepam. Looks like these are the three that they're listing on this website. May be used for treatment of anxiety and is less likely to cause sedation than other anti-anxiety drugs prescribed for anxiety, panic disorder. May also be prescribed off-label for sexual dysfunction, SSRI-induced borderline personality disorder, compared to Xanax. May be used for the treatment of anxiety or panic disorders. It is addictive, and withdrawal symptoms can be severe. Prescribed for anxiety, panic disorder, and depression. May also be used for purposes not listed in this medication guide. And clonazepam may reduce seizure frequency in specific seizure disorders and can be used short-term for panic disorder. However, can cause dependence and withdrawal symptoms on discontinuation. Prescribed for panic disorder, seizure prevention, and epilepsy. May also be prescribed off-label for benzodiazepine, withdrawal, anxiety, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, sleep paralysis, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, insomnia, night terrors, migraine prevention, hypercaplexia, cluster tic syndrome, chronic myofascial pain, facial pain, burning mouth syndrome, and temporomandibular joint disorder. So as you can see, there are many reasons why a doctor would go, here, take this. Opioid receptor and MUA agonists. Fentanyl, folks. Fentanyl. Here we go. Used clinically for analgesia, pain relief. Things like morphine and fentanyl. The report points to the possible uses of carfentanil, a non-lethal calmative. The drug has thus far only been approved for use in animals, for example. The drug has been used successfully to immobilize a large variety of exotic animals. Interestingly, the report discusses fentanyl, a derivative of which was used by Russian authorities to break up a siege in Moscow theater in October of 2002. It notes that fentanyl has a high abuse potential and may be habit-forming, and serious life-threatening respiratory depression could occur. Now, where have I heard some analysis that talks about a certain individual having a lethal dose of fentanyl in his system and that likely being the cause of death? Just going to leave that one out there, kind of lingering in the wind. You can research that yourself. The latter clinical effect was devastatingly illustrated during its use in Moscow. Talking about using a derivative of fentanyl for suppression of a hostage situation, where it was responsible for the death of at least 129 of the 800 hostages. The Guardian recently reported the death toll might have been even higher. So what happened is the Russian special forces went and used this derivative of fentanyl in order to incapacitate everybody in hostages, right? In order to take care of the situation. And out of the 800 hostages, at least 129 hostages died. So you've got these anesthetics and some other seizure type of medication. You have a cholecystine B receptor antagonist. I'm chopping up that word. Potential use to inhibit or prevent panic. There's choline receptors in the body. And that's where this cholecystine, whatever it is, that's where that comes from. Choline receptors in the body. This has to do with the electrochemical signaling. We are electrochemical creatures. And the chemical component is very, very important because it regulates the electrical activity in the body. And what we're looking at here, this section is dealing with chemicals that inhibit, excite, suppress, manipulate, change, chemicals that do these things to your nervous system. And these are being considered and are now implemented as non-lethal ways to interface and interact and control and manipulate people and in a more general sense, the population. The recommendations section of the report emphasizes the potential benefit for the U.S. military of collaboration with pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries in the development of incapacitating chemicals as weapons. What does the takedown of society look like? We are 20 years into this No Child Left Behind crap. So you have people, children, who have likely been on medications for over half of their lives at this point. And we can look at the percentage of children on medications. We can look that up. We're not gonna get very far in this presentation, but percentage of children medicated. Let's see what ADHD, are children over medicated? Here we go. Let's see what this says. In 2014, National Center for Health Statistics, this is from National Institute of Health website, right? Oh my God. Recent symposium at Carter Center featured a report by the Center for Disease Control that as many as 10,000 toddlers may be receiving psychostimulant medication like Ritalin. National Center for Health Statistics reported 7.5% of U.S. children between the ages of 6 and 17 were taking medication for emotional or behavioral difficulties in 2011 and 2012. The CDC reports a 5-fold increase in the number of children under 18 on psychostimulants from 1988 to 1944 to 2007 to 2010. So from the period 1988 to 1944, that being one period of time, compared to 2007 to 2010, there was a 5-fold increase of the number of children under the age of 18 put on psychostimulants, with the most recent rate of 4.2%. The same report estimates that 1.3% of children are on antidepressants. The rate of antipsychotic prescriptions for children has increased 6-fold over the same period. The rate of antipsychotic prescriptions for children has increased 6-fold over the same period, according to the study of office visits with the National Ambulatory Medical Care Survey. In children under the age of 5, psychotropic prescription rates peaked at 1.5% in 2002 to 2005 and declined to 1% from 2006 to 2009. What else? Physicians once called attention to deficient hyperactivity disorder. Often now elicits a diagnosis of childhood bipolar disorder, leading to a 40-fold increase in prevalence. Bipolar disorder, 40-fold increase between 1994 and 1995 being one end, like one comparison timeline. When that timeline, the period of time, 94 to 95, compared to 2002 to 2003, there's a 40-fold increase in childhood bipolar disorders. Here it says that 7.5% of children are on medication, 4.2% are on psychostimulants. Seems stunning, but knowing that 11% of children having a diagnosis of ADHD raises the possibility of undertreatment. So they're looking at both ends of the spectrum here in this publication. Shouldn't we be asking why so many children at younger ages are being seen for emotional and behavioral problems? Should we look at another? 2010. This is just a blog, so Kevin MD. So talks about different drugs here. The number of prescriptions for atypical antipsychotics for children and adolescents doubled to 4.4 million between 2003 and 2006. Antipsychotics. It says up here, patients receiving tricyclics, stimulants, SSRIs, and mood stabilizers. Neuroleptics were used 10% of visits. Mood stabilizers seem to be the most effective. SSRIs seem to be associated with the risk of inducing mania. That sounds fun. All right, so anyway, let's get back to what we were looking at. You can look this up for yourself. All I did was type in percentage of children medicated, and you can get more specific than that if you want. Just pick a type of medication or a type of disease like psychosis or depression or bipolar or whatever. Let's see what else is in here. I think we've beat this up a little bit, so we will continue on. They talk about methods of distribution and administration. What else is in this document? We're only on page 16. That's crazy. What else has been highlighted in here? Combined technologies. And I highlighted this simply to provide a couple examples, but it's really to illustrate this idea that the DoD and other similar type entities, if you will, are looking at combining non-lethal technologies to control people. And this is a non-lethal weapons paper, if you will, with the focus on non-lethal weapons. But at those levels, the think tank levels, if you will, combined technologies would be applicable in many other applications as it relates to looking at large populations. Combined technologies. And what they're talking about here is suggesting an approach, right? When you're talking about combined technologies, what does that look like? An approach to non-lethal weapons development termed 5SMC, which targets all 5 human senses: sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch, as well as motor skill and cognition. So that is a high-level overarching focus or goal, if you will, is to utilize and implement manipulation, which could be stimulation or suppression of all 5 senses, as well as your motor skills and your cognition. And that would be falling underneath the category of combined technologies. Multisensory grenades. That sounds fun. Being developed by Scientific Applications Research. It employs light, sound, and malodorant stink bombs to overwhelm an individual or a group. So it's like a flashbang that smells like poop. It also has a modular design that may allow for incorporation of other technologies in the future. The U.S. National Institute of Justice is funding an evaluation of this weapons for civilian use to control the movement of individuals or crowds. Flashbang devices are available that combine bright light and painful sound to disorientate. The effect of new generation flashbang round developed for law enforcement purposes through the funding from the National Institute of Justice. The National Institute of Justice was prescribed by its developers in a recent article. If you're a target, it would be pretty terrifying. You probably will think that you're going to be incinerated, and that's a quote from the National Institute of Justice. Or from a group that was funded by the National Institute of Justice. Talks about delivery vehicles, unmanned aerial vehicles, robots, drones. This was interesting. Encapsulation and microencapsulation. These technologies are increasingly being seen as methods for more accurately delivering chemical agents, such as RCAs, riot control agents, incapacitants, and malodorants. Encapsulated projectiles, such as those for pepper ball and FN-303, are already in use by law enforcement agencies delivering OC and PAVA, which is the synthetic version of pepper spray, and malodorant rounds. They're looking at micro encapsulation for anti-traction materials, which stuff that makes it slippery, right? And they micro encapsulate it so it doesn't dry out. The micro encapsulation keeps it hydrated until the micro encapsulation is broken open by stepping on it or by driving on it, and then it becomes very, very slippery. Non-lethal technology and academic research symposium in 2000 APM proposed various reasons for encapsulating non-lethal weapons: to achieve controlled and remote release, to make active materials easier and safer to handle, compartmentalize multiple component systems, protect sensitive materials from their environment, and to turn liquids into powders and solids. And this was interesting to me because they use these types of techniques to deliver medicine too. Micro encapsulating, nano encapsulating, things for like gene therapy. Being able to encapsulate something in a nanosphere or a microsphere, put it into the system, allow it to travel where it needs to go, and then on demand, open it up and release the payload. So these techniques cross-apply in other disciplines. So it's important to understand conceptually what they do. And in this case, microencapsulation is designed to achieve a modular, safer to handle, more stable, selectively applied mechanism for non-lethal control. Mechanical rupture, weight of a human, thermal release, activation of temperature, shell dissolution, the presence of water, photolytic release, exposure to sunlight, osmotic and pH-dependent release, enzymatic release, and electric current. Now, these are all mechanisms by which the microencapsulation can be opened up. How many of these apply if the microencapsulation of anything was put into your body medically? A medicine, for example. Cancer therapy uses this a great deal. There's lots and lots of patents out there for cancer treatments that use techniques like this. With the presence of water, yes, that could be done inside the body. A thermal release, yes, that can be done inside the body. How, you say? Well, they could just put you in an oven, or they could put focused radio waves on your body, put you in a radio frequency field, or direct radio frequencies at a specific location on your body, and you will heat up. Osmotic and pH-dependent release, right? So that's a change in the pH in your body. That's possible inside the body. There are sensors to measure pH. pH is not necessarily consistent throughout the body. Enzymatic release, well, we have enzymes in our body. If you could deliver an enzyme or get the body to excrete or secrete an enzyme, that could also release whatever's inside a microencapsulant that's put in the body. And electric current. And we know that electric currents can be applied to the body in a variety of ways, electrodes or by inducing a magnetic field or an electric field. But the most non-invasive way is really to put somebody in a magnetic field, and with the Lorentz effect, it will basically create sound waves and or electric currents just by being in a magnetic field. We'll discuss that again as time permits. I'm saying all this to you, and we're talking about non-lethal weapons, but it's important to understand that these concepts apply in a variety of ways. Human effects. I don't know if I highlighted anything in here. We are nearing the end of this document. We are at the end of this document. So there are two more that I went through and highlighted, thinking that I wasn't going to have enough material. But we're going to screen through these pretty fast because I really want to find some specific pieces. We haven't really seen directed energy. They talk about what non-lethal means. What's a non-lethal weapon? In a sense, non-lethal weapon is a misnomer. There is no requirement that non-lethal weapons can be incapable of killing or causing permanent damage. This is a philosophical argument, right? Moreover, the ideal non-lethal weapon would be a system with continuous visible intensity and influence ranging from a warning tap to a stunning blow to a lethal effect. What else is in here? So 2003, representative from the NDIA conference. It's a non-lethal weapons conference and exhibition. Representative from the Infantry Center emphasizes similar trends for non-lethal weapons developments for the U.S. Army, such as the development for longer range weapons. It also talks of a move away from kinetic energy and riot control agents towards directed energy weapons in the longer term, with the eventual aim of developing man-portable directed energy weapons. This is the U.S. Army Infantry looking at non-lethal weapon technologies, showing that they want to focus more on trend towards man-portable directed energy weapons and getting away from kinetic energy weapons. So light, sound, and electromagnetic waves in a man-portable directed energy weapons platform used by the infantry, man-portable. Guidelines for suitable technologies. We're going to keep moving because we've covered a lot of these things already. Let's see if we can find radio frequency. I want to find these real quick and see. I'm pretty sure it's going to be in this last document here. Active denial, nah. Yeah. DARPA Technology, 2004 Symposium, Director of Precision Urban Combat Systems, DARPA. In many cases, our goals can be achieved by influencing our adversaries without the use of lethal force, DARPA Tech, 2004. We need to develop new and innovative ways to legally and justly apply non-lethal force and effects based on operations in urban environments. Speculating on concepts that may enable non-lethal incapacitation in urban environments, he asked. Are there ways to deliver radio frequency or optical energy in a point or net-like fashion to subdue one or many potential threats for periods of seconds to minutes? Is it possible with adjustable power, multi-wavelength, modulated, high-powered light-emitting diode-based systems to dazzle or distract potential threats, to stun them or disorient them? Is it possible to develop free-flying projectile tasers to electrically subdue an adversary? How small can we make tasers? Could soldiers or Marines deploy electromagnetic dragnets to immobilize large numbers of potential combatants in a populated, remote urban zone? Can we develop projectile-deployed foams or glues which greatly expand once in place, effectively denying threat mobility? Can we develop electromagnetic techniques to deny structures and urban avenues of approach which are unattended and affordable and controllable in range and scope? High-intensity electromagnetic pulse generators to short electric circuits and improvised bombs, for example. However, he noted the size and space requirements are a problem, and existing equipment requires a truck to carry it. Well, that's not going to be the case because we're putting up antenna arrays. We're putting up a commercial-grade network. You know, things that would be too bulky for a human to carry, but could be on a vehicle or, you know, mounted on a tower every 800 feet, maybe 4 at an intersection, plus the Wi-Fi arrays in every single office. You know, electromagnetic pulse generators, these things that we call cell towers and Wi-Fi access points. Electromagnetic pulse generators. Now, how does communication work over wireless networks? It's done with pulsed electromagnetic waves, modulated electromagnetic waves. What else is in this document? We're going to breeze through here. Calmatives. Here we are again with calmatives, strategic payload concepts. Calmatives might be considered to deal with otherwise difficult situations in which neutralizing individuals could enable ultimate mission success. The principal technical issue is the balance between effectiveness. The targets are truly calmed, and margins of safety, avoiding overexposure and resulting in fatality, like mass shootings, of neutral bystanders. Directed energy, lasers, or high-powered microwaves provide an effective, less than lethal capability against dismounts. Active denial systems, laser devices, psychological operations, influence an adversary's behavior. In the near term, we have the ability to manipulate speech and audio and still and video images. In the midterm, we could pursue such capabilities as directed audio beams. And in the far term, we could pursue capabilities such as holograms that could remotely project an image in a room. Technologies, shock rounds, rubber bullets that discharge an electrical shock upon impact. That sounds fun. So you have non-lethal rounds, right? Rubber bullets. Only when you get hit by one, it delivers an electric shock to you, and it uses the piezoelectric effect. So the actual kinetic energy, the deformation of the round itself, generates the electricity. That's pretty cool stuff, honestly. Pretty cool stuff. Acoustic weapons, LRADs. Those of you that are familiar with LRADs, right? They're using them in Afghanistan. We talked about LRADs earlier. Active denial systems, again, is millimeter wave systems. The Council on Foreign Relations reports countermeasures might proliferate in the form of aluminum foil umbrellas perforated with small holes to allow visibilities, but able to block the penetration of millimeter waves from VMADs. That is BS. They're not going to put an LRAD system on a truck and not have it be scalable. What I mean by that is they're not able to move through different frequencies. And with the sophistication of radar arrays today, they can emit more than one frequency to penetrate something like aluminum foil. It's just a bunch of crap. Anyway, I don't like the CFR. I think they're pieces of shit. So, high-powered microwaves. Potential disruption, degradation, damage, or destruction of an adversary's electronic infrastructure and military capability. These targets' capabilities include local computer and communication systems, as well as large and small air defense and command and control systems. In many cases, the effect can be generated covertly with no collateral structure or human damage. Complex electromagnetic wave transmissions that specifically influence or impact electronic circuitry. And I can show you Boeing patents that talk about that. When we get into directed energy weapon systems specifically, we'll look at that. It's a very real thing. And things like Faraday cages that's just anyway, if they really want through a Faraday cage, like a block-it pocket or whatever, they can get through it. The Faraday cage really is just for general protection. If they want in your device, they're getting in your device. Doesn't matter if you put it in a sleeve or not. And I can show you that. I'll show you that right now. Why not? Faraday. Here it is, right here. Remote circuit interaction. So we just talked about that, right? Concentrated electromagnetic energy to disrupt circuits without disrupting anything else. No buildings, no people. Faraday cage, a system and a method for remotely affecting electronics with conductive enclosures within conductive enclosures. So a block pocket or a Faraday cage or whatever is basically just a piece of material that's put around something like a cell phone or some other electronic equipment that's designed to disperse or block electromagnetic waves, right? What this says, this is from Boeing back in 2008, which, they share board members with companies like AT&T. So Randall Stephenson, by the way, stepped down from Boeing in December of 2017, along with a major electronics / electric company. That's a national company in the United States. And he recently retired as CEO / chairman of AT&T after the Time Warner merger. And the Turner purchase is where AT&T picked up CNN. Oh yeah, CNN is owned by AT&T. AT&T is the parent company of CNN. AT&T subsidizes CNN because CNN sucks. They can't make their own money. So 2 different frequencies can be selected so that they penetrate a Faraday cage, and therein, within the Faraday cage, form an electromagnetic radiation of a 3rd frequency that resonates within the enclosure. This frequency can interact with electronics, such as to disrupt operation. So you can imagine the sophistication of something like this. More than 1 frequency, could be 2, 3, or 4 frequencies shot at your phone, which is in something like a block pocket, to then resonate circuits, communicate and talk, and then use additional frequencies to then measure and monitor what the circuit interaction is doing. Faraday cages are well known. Faraday cages are enclosures such as boxes that are made of conductive material such as metal. Sensitive electronics are frequently packaged within such metal enclosures to isolate them from electromagnetic radiation that would otherwise have a detrimental effect thereon, or they'll spy on you. In some instances, it's desirable to remotely interact with these circuits contained within enclosures, such as spying on you. For example, it can be desirable to disrupt the operation of an automobile's engine, this is just an example, by remotely interacting with the electronic systems thereof to halt a police pursuit. A method for remotely affecting electronics within a conductive enclosure can comprise transmitting electromagnetic radiation of 2 different frequencies into the enclosure. Frequencies can be selected such that they will penetrate the enclosure and form electromagnetic radiations of a 3rd frequency within the enclosure. The 3rd frequency can be a frequency that is likely to affect the operation of the electronic circuitry within the enclosure. We have 15 minutes. We are going to speed this up because I found this just before the show. So this is report number 7, and we are at 2005. We started in 2003. We briefly looked at 2004. A lot of it's a repeat. It talks about chemicals again, neurotransmitters and stuff. This one, however, 2005. In his recent book, The Men Who Stared at Goats, John Ronson draws connections between military intelligence and psychological operations, interrogations in Afghanistan and Guantanamo Bay, and non-lethal weapons. He argues that the purpose of using flashing lights and loud music or noises during these interrogations is more profound than sleep deprivation. You ever wonder why all those kids are on all those meds, folks? Do you notice the correlation? The timing? 1996, Telecommunications Act of 1996, revised the Communications Act of 1934, made available the distribution and deployment for cell towers, streamlined and refined the digitalization of cable television to improve and increase channel capacity, cable TV, which means you can then modulate more complex signals and override other signals on top of those signals to a cable set-top box. And you have the cell phone towers that go up at breakneck speed as a result of the revision of the Telecom Act of 1996. And then the 2000s hit, and off we go with cell phones. Everybody's got to have one. It's the new popular thing. Very shortly after that, we get into the smartphone. We get into the mobile tablets. We get into immersing ourselves in an electromagnetic bath. But more importantly, as it relates to this discussion, is this idea of putting flashing lights and music very, very close to people. And we will look at a patent that discusses using monitors to flash light, to induce hypnotic states, to induce sexual excitement. We will look at patents that discuss using light and sound to improve focus, to improve concentration, to induce sleep. Lockheed Martin, for example, uses light and sound into the eyes and ears in order to keep their air crew awake while they are flying their airplanes or the airplanes that they build. These are systems that they put into the airplanes so that crewmen don't fall asleep when they're up in the air. There's patents for that. Let's continue. The New Science published an editorial in March 2005 detailing research in the US to develop pulsed energy projectiles, directed energy weapons. See the directed energy section of this report. If this is not in the show notes, I'll add it. I'll find it and add it because this is an important one, which raises serious ethical concerns over research. There is something chilling about turning research intended to ease suffering into a weapon that can be used to hurt people. Nocios, I don't know how to say that, pain receptors, nerve cells that convey pain in the body, have been studied by researchers trying to relieve chronic pain. It emerged this week that a group working for the Pentagon is using that knowledge to turn the tables to maximize the pain caused by non-lethal weapons called pulsed energy projectiles. So it is no surprise that pain researchers have reacted in horror to this plan. Another example from the NTAR Conference of Medical Research being channeled into weapons development is based on new technologies developed by the Center for Bioelectrics. This is important, which is a joint venture between the College of Engineering of Technology at the Old Dominion University, Virginia, and Eastern Virginia Medical School. The Air Force Research Laboratory funds the center. Potential benefits of the new technology are described on the Center for Bioelectrics. Bioelectrics refers to the use of pulsed power or the application of powerful electrical pulses for extremely short periods of time to manipulate biological cells, tissues, and/or organisms. Researchers at the Center for Bioelectrics are testing the use of these high-intensity electrical surges to remove diseased or unwanted cells or groups of cells such as tumors. Use of this technology in medicine and biology is the first of its kind in the world. The biomedical applications based on ultra-fast pulsed cell interactions have extraordinary potential to treat persons with cancer, cardiovascular disease, and other conditions. However, the U.S. Air Force's interest in the technology is less altruistic. Parts of the research effort, which was jointly presented at the NTAR 2004 by the Center for Bioelectrics and the AFRL, Air Force Research Laboratory, address neuromuscular disruption with ultra-short pulses. The purpose of the research is to find a way of using the technique to cause electrical incapacitation in humans for use as a non-lethal weapon. The Stress and Motivated Behavioral Institute brings together researchers from the neuroscience and medicine departments at the New Jersey Medical School. Their research investigates the neurobiological basis of stress and anxiety, with a view to contributing the understanding of stress-related physical and mental illness, and with particular focus on Gulf War syndrome and women's mental health. In addition to its examining the relationship between stress and learning and memory coping. However, the SMBI is also investigating the military applications of its research and seeking to develop non-lethal suppressive means for military and police. Indeed, the SMBI was originally set up in 2002 with a grant from the U.S. Army's Armament Research, Development, and Engineering Center at Picatinny, New Jersey, within the main purpose of the studying target suppression. The ARDEC describes itself as the Army's center of lethality and conducts advanced weapons development. One of SMBI's current weapons development project is the use of infrasonic acoustic frequencies to cause incapacitation, which they have been testing on rodents. Using infrasonic waves to manipulate stress and other related mental and physical illnesses. That's using sound, folks. 5 non-lethal weapons technologies were identified as being the most useful for use in accomplishing these tasks. Tasks are denying persons from accessing an area, rescuing individuals or groups, denying ground, air, and sea vehicles from accessing an area, neutralizing ground vehicles, protecting facilities and equipment, neutralizing infrastructure and facilities, and neutralizing communications, RF devices, radio frequency devices, rapid barriers, acoustic, electromagnetic, and mechanical, anti-traction, stun devices, and nets. Non-lethal weapons, disadvantages of anti-material and anti-personnel non-lethal weapons. Anti-material weapons discussed are RF devices to degrade electronics, lasers, high-powered lasers to destroy, and low power to dazzle, chemicals, slippery foam, sticky foam, super adhesive substances, super caustic substances, and graphite powders, biologicals, bacteria to degrade material, and barriers, rapid barriers, nets, entanglements, and tire puncturing systems. Anti-personnel weapons addressed are microwave systems for skin heating, lasers, skin heating or dazzling, chemicals, riot control agents, and incapacitating agents, acoustic technologies, psychological and physical effects of acoustic technologies. They can induce acoustic effects using microwaves, folks. We will discuss voice-to-skull technology perhaps next. Maybe we'll do that next. We'll go over voice-to-skull technologies and what electromagnetic waves can do with respect to imaging in a medical environment. Barriers, rapid barriers, kinetic munitions, stun devices, vortex generators, paint dyes, on and on and on and on and on. Let's see what else is in here. The U.S. Department of R&D. November 2004, Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate. U.S. Marine Corps published broad area announcement seeking to fund new research and development for non-lethal weapons. 2004. Human effects of non-lethal directed energy exposure to include physiological and behavioral response. Examples include high-powered microwaves, pulsed and continuous radio frequency radiation. Non-lethal directed energy weapons, directed energy exposure to include physiological and behavioral responses to pulsed and continuous wave radio frequency radiation, including lasers and laser-induced plasma stimuli. Emerging directed energy weapons that have non-lethal applications, specifically counter-personnel, counter-material, and counter-capability missions. So, specific areas of research, geez, it goes on and on and on and on. Well, we are almost out of time. So what I want to share with you is that as they move forward in time, this is 2004 now, they're adding more and more language into these non-lethal weapons reports pertaining to directed energy systems, sound, RF, millimeter wave, and lasers and light. So you have the electromagnetic spectrum and you have sound. I want to show you these things before we go. Electromagnetic personnel interdiction and control method. You can get to these patents on humaninternet.org. You can go to the directed energy section underneath wireless. It's right here, directed energy. And you will find these patents that I'm sharing with you right now, and or a similar type family patent. This one discusses using radio frequency electromagnetic energy that will leave the nerve cells and surrounding tissues with no damage and create severe motion sickness and a psychological effect of helplessness. And these symptoms persist even after you remove the focused directed RF energy. And it talks about using the Lorentz force to disrupt the normal mechanical transduction process and or the chemical engine by which sound, position, and other sensory input are converted into messages by the nerve cells and sent to the brain. So they're using electromagnetic energy in the carrier wave of 900 megahertz to 4,000 megahertz. So 900 megahertz up to 4 gigahertz. Using a subcarrier of 1 to 500 hertz, they're modulating these two things together and sending it out over an antenna to manipulate the nerve cells in the vestibular system in your ear that affect things like general awareness, orientation, induces things like nausea and helplessness and or potentially fear. These frequencies, folks, are the same frequencies that are used today for mobile wireless communications. Cell towers, Wi-Fi, you name it, 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Cell, 900 megahertz. Your cordless phone at your house, 900 megahertz, 915 megahertz. You have the range of the 1.3, 1.9 gigahertz for most communications, cellular communications. Here's another one, electromagnetic personnel interdiction control method. This one's man portable, generally the same thing. Talks about using electromagnetic waves to manipulate your nerves. And ion channels, talks about manipulating the ion channels. We'll go over these in some detail as time goes on. And the last one I want to show you is this one, electromagnetic wave sensing and modulating of neuronal activities. This is where they can put electromagnetic waves into your brain and do things like put you to sleep. Just like that. Happy driving down the road.